at the conclusion of this meeting. So with that, we'll start with introductions. I'm CJ Kamick, proud to be the superintendent of Fremont Unified School District. And I'm just going to call on people as I see them on my screen and ask you to introduce yourself and the group which you're representing. So we'll start with Susan, please.
Apologies.
I think you might still be on mute, Susan.
Sorry about that. My name is Susan, and I'm here to represent FUDTA. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Liz, and Michelle will be after that.
Hi, I'm Liz Long, and I am also here representing FUDTA.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Hartman-Grouper representing SEIU.
Thank you. And we'll go to Patty and then Rocio.
Hi, Patty. I support Superintendent. Oh, my apologies. It's another Patty.
Are you going to say something else, Patty?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought somebody had said something. Patty Sandoval, I support the Superintendent and Board of Trustees.
I'm Rocio Cule, and I'm representing Fremont Council PTA.
Thank you. And then we'll go to James and then Stephen.
Hi, everyone. James Arcala, Director of Budget here at Fremont Unified School District.
Hello, Stephen Musto. I'm representing Fremont School Managers Association.
Thank you both. And then we'll go to Tara and Kimberly.
Hi, I'm Tara Carey. I'm the Executive Director for FUDTA.
Hi, I'm Kimberly. I'm representing SEIU.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Syria and Trustee Jones.
Hi, I'm Surya and I'm representing Surf 40.
Diane Jones, Trustee.
Thank you both. We'll go to Trustee Zhang and then Tammy.
Yajin Zhang, Board Trustee Member.
Tammy Solis, CSCA.
And we'll finish with Anvi and Mr. Hillman.
Hi, I'm Anvi. I'm also representing Surf 40.
Okay, and I apologize. There's two more names here. We have Luis Zamora, who's doing the video in the background, and then we'll go to Ganesh and Yokes.
I'm Ganesh, representing as a parent and community member from the Irvington area.
Hi, I'm Yogs. I am a parent in Irvington, and I'm also part of the PTSA. I'm actively the PTSA team.
Thank you so much. Excuse me. As is noted on the agenda, we have our purpose and goals. I'll review those just as a summary without bringing them onto the screen. Our purpose and goals here are to establish a body where we can have discussions about financial issues facing the district, where this group can provide feedback to me as the superintendent, and then I take that feedback and provide it to the Board of Education as a whole. Our norms generally include the fact that we're going to seek to understand first, and that we're going to understand that each individual on this call brings their perspective to the conversation. We'll honor that perspective and hear all information and try and reserve any judgment, and that we can create a safe space for sharing ideas and questions. As we move into today's meeting, beginning on our topics specifically, the first thing I want to introduce is I'm just going to start sharing my screen here, and hopefully it will all work the way it's supposed to work, like we have had plenty of practice with Zoom and screen sharing. So it looks like everybody can probably see that. Let me see if I can just make it a little bit bigger for everybody. Okay. So our first item is an overview of our school finance town halls. And I'm just going to bring up on the screen in front of you the place where you can find that information and review for everybody that in the recent weeks, we did hold two school funding presentations on the 16th and the 18th. One was held at Washington High School. The other one was held at Mission San Jose High School. And in cases of interest to you, the streaming of the presentations is available for your viewing, as well as the presentations of the events. The slide deck for each event is there. I do want to call out that at the end of each event, we ask participants, either in person or watching online, to engage in a thought exchange and provide some feedback and information for us. So I'm going to pull onto the screen in front of us some of the summary of those results from this thought exchange. And I know that they'll be hard to read on the screen themselves, but what this is an AI function. I have gone through and read the results of the about 90 submissions that we received. But what you can see is some of the areas that were identified: facilities funding, talent attraction, modernization, mental health, and then the fifth area is special ed funding. So these obviously were topics that are front of mind for our audience. We did not really get into the discussion of mental health in the presentation itself. We did get into special education funding. We did talk about the fact that modernization of our facilities is difficult and challenging, and in many ways dependent on local support, because the state of California, absent an established statewide school bond, generally does not send monies to districts specifically for the purpose of improving and enhancing facilities. We did talk about the need to recruit and retain the best employees possible. And so that was part of our presentation. And in conjunction with modernization, we talked about the need for local facilities funding, as we have under Measure E. Also, we talked about, as you can see there highlighted, is Measure I, and the need for local support for our parcel tax. So that's just a quick summary of some of the feedback that we received. Other areas of feedback talked about the need to continue providing healthy meals for all kids, and that was something that was discussed in one of the live Q&As for one of the events, was the question about funding for school meals. Before we move on to the next topic, I just want to open it up to the group. Were there any comments or questions, clarifying points, or even points of discussion regarding the town halls? And since I'm sharing my screen, there we go. Now I can see everybody. Any input, discussion points, questions?
Superintendent, where is the link to the recordings? I saw you bring that up. Is there a place I can find that?
Yes, on the agenda itself, you can click on the link that I've provided. It will take you to the website where we have a section where you can click on the streaming of the presentation as well as the slide deck. It's on our website under fremontunified.org/schedule-news/events.
Okay, thank you.
Rocio.
I had a question, Mr. Kamak. Are you going to present, have this presentation in the American attendance area or in other attendance areas, or so far right now, it's only these two presentations?
We didn't do it by attendance areas. We just did it in kind of northern and southern end of the district. We tried to pick 2 nights and 2 locations, and then we recorded both events so they could be streamed for anybody to see. But we didn't necessarily set them up to be one presentation for each individual attendance area. So right now, these will be the 2 events that we hold.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Share the agenda again one more moment.
Sure.
Okay, I'm looking at the agenda on my calendar. I'm not seeing this, so am I looking at the wrong place?
I can send the group the link. I can put it in the chat, not to worry.
Thank you.
I can take care of that.
Thank you very much, Patty. So we touched a bit. Let me just see if there's any other. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. I'm going to move to the next topic. In the last Superintendent's Budget Advisory Task Force, Mr. Arcala did give us a presentation regarding our unaudited actuals, and that included a little bit of information regarding our enrollment summary. I'm just going to bring up one slide from our town hall presentation that we held, and that is just to touch base on enrollment for our group here. In the enrollment discussion, we have finished our initial CBEDS count, which, as you may recall from prior meetings, is kind of the base number we set for the year, which is established by the state for a date in October. And our enrollment for that date was right around 32,655 students, which is about 367 students higher than our projected enrollment. It's not an increased enrollment, as you see on the screen. It actually still represents a decline of about 51 students. But in terms of trends and where we're going, we were expecting to see a decline of 400 plus students. So to see a decline of about 51 students, we think is a very good thing for us. That does mean that we'll likely see some increased revenue. In response to the increased student enrollment, though, we've had to hire some additional staff, which is a good thing to be doing and a good problem to have. One thing I would like to note, although we don't have any actual data behind the reason as to why, but we do see a significant bump in our enrollments at the elementary school. And I say that we don't have specific data because we haven't gone out to collect it, but I am making some assumptions that extending our kindergarten program to an extended day program has likely helped with that enrollment number. But we'll have to do a little bit deeper digging to determine what the change over last year was related to kindergarten enrollment. Also, the expansion of TK may have also played a factor in those numbers as well. So I just wanted to come back to this group and touch on the enrollment because we do spend a lot of time in our group talking about enrollment because it is such a fundamental part of the state's funding model, which we also talked about in our town halls. Any questions or comments on enrollment before we move forward? Okay. Seeing none. Moving to the next item, I wanted to just touch base on two areas before we move into a requested item from the task force in the last meeting, which was if we were going to be dreaming big about future plans, what would we want to plan for? What would we want to create in Fremont Unified? So before we engage in that longer discussion, I wanted to touch on a few things. First was something that we did talk about in our last meeting, which is the fact that we have currently gone through some community outreach efforts, both for staff and for the community at large, related to educating the community around local funding, the things that are happening in Fremont Unified. And that is really focused on something that we've discussed in the boardroom previously, which is the potential of a future ballot measure. So we have talked about a future parcel tax because Measure I expires June of 2025, and that generates about $4.5 million for Fremont Unified. And we've also talked about the potential of a future bond program. And we have a $650 million bond from Measure E. We just sold our last series of bonds in 2022 of about $120 million. So we are looking at future ballot measures for both the parcel tax and a general obligation bond. I want to highlight that no decisions have been formally made, but we have gone through some staff and community outreach efforts. And just to pull that up for reference, and Patty, if you could maybe put this in the chat as well for the group. We've established a landing page on our website called Join the Conversation. And so one of the things that we've done is we've sent out a survey to staff for their input, and we're reviewing those feedback forms as they come in their own separate format. And we've also sent something out to our parent community to engage them in a similar type survey, and we're reviewing those results as they're coming back. And then outside of our staff and our parents and guardians, we have sent a mailer out to our voting community because even though it will feel to us as those who work for Fremont Unified, like our parents and guardians are Fremont Unified, and the city and community of Fremont, we have to remember that our voting population extends far beyond our parent and guardian population. So we have sent out mailers to our voting population. We're getting both electronic feedback from the link that we've shared with them in the mailer, and we're also getting some hard copies sent back to the district office, and we're reviewing that input as well. In the coming week or so, we'll be sending out an additional mailer to the voting population to, again, have some engagement and outreach with them. And you'll notice if you've looked closely at the board agenda for Wednesday night, we do have an item on there under our contract section, which is to expand the contract with Godby Research, who does our polling. And we'll be looking at some initial polling results in a few moments. But expanding that contract will allow us to go out for a second round of polling information. And the intent behind that is to see if the community outreach that we've done and the information that we've provided is impacting the perspective of voters across Fremont, so that we can have the best idea possible when looking at polling data of where our community may or may not be willing to support future ballot measures. Any questions on the join the conversation or community outreach that we've been doing in the recent weeks?
I have a question, CJ. When did these surveys go out to staff?
Oh gosh, I want to say about maybe 3 weeks ago. They went out to staff in an all-staff email in the beginning of October.
I'm gonna have to take a look at that because I don't remember seeing it come through. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. I'll do that.
All right, not seeing any other questions. We'll move on to the next item. The next item is an initial summary of polling results, and I've put together just a basic set of slides for this group to review today. We can send out to the group or put in the chat another link to our website where we have a more extensive set of the polling results if you'd like to review them in greater detail. But in terms of going through some initial information today, I'm going to do my best to just summarize the results of our polling. And I will admittingly say at the beginning of this that I am not a polling research expert, which is why we hire polling experts to do the work for us. But I will be sharing some of Brian Godby from Brian Godby Research. I'll be sharing some of their work. And hopefully it'll just be a point of information for us and something that our group can use for consideration. So looking at the overview and the research objectives, you can see on this screen, again, the point is to assess potential voter support for future ballot measures, also identify priorities of our voting population. In regards to the methodology, I will just let this slide exist for a little bit. You'll note the sample size. It may seem small, but it is a significant sample size in terms of gaining an accurate picture. If you get some of those calls, some of you may have gotten some of those calls for the poll. The research company does them both via telephone call and online. And you'll also notice the margin of error that exists. And moving to some of the results and the key findings. On this slide here, what we're looking at is basically a question towards our voting population of how they feel Fremont Unified School District is doing in providing a quality education. So the two bars that you see, the first is from a November 2020 number, and then you'll see the November 2024 number on top of that. You'll see that the public perspective of how we're doing in providing a quality education has actually gone up since 2020, up to about 56.5%. And that is the very favorable or somewhat favorable. And I think that is a credit to the work of our dedicated staff throughout the school district, most especially at our school sites. And on the second slide here, which is page 6 of this presentation, this is a question to our voting population about their satisfaction with the district's management of our public funds. Again, the bottom graph you see is November 2020, with about 36% saying that it's very favorable or somewhat favorable. to November of 2024, where 43.4% identify as very favorable or somewhat favorable in terms of our management of public funds. And this is whether or not our voting population would agree with the statement that Fremont Unified School District needs additional funding. Again, November 2020 on the bottom, November 2024 on the top. And you can see that that number for 2024 has increased a little bit compared to 2020 in terms of the voting population that would strongly agree or somewhat agree that we need additional funding. So when we then look at educational funding measure, this slide outlines for us a hypothetical support for a reauthorization of our parcel tax. So that's important to note because reauthorization signifies that we're asking the voters if they would support the same parcel tax amount that is currently in place of $73. And so this targets a potential March of 2024 voting population. And what you see is an indication of 65.4% in support. Definitely yes, or probably yes. And remember, for a parcel tax, we are looking at a 2/3 threshold for passing a parcel tax measure, which is different than a bond measure. Remember that a bond measure is the strict majority at 51%. So this comes a little bit short of that 2/3 percent that we're looking for, but it is a good piece of data for us. In terms of the related priorities, on this slide, you'll note that the priorities written out on the left, and you'll see the scale on the bottom of that, the things that rank the highest as somewhat more likely or much more likely to support the reauthorization if it includes these things. And you'll see some common threads here: attract and retain qualified teachers, highly qualified teachers, science, technology, engineering, art, and then keeping schools safe and well maintained. Those come out as our top 4. And then they also ask about informational statements and how it may impact the voting perspective. So again, you'll see somewhat more likely or much more likely to support. And you'll see some statements about whether or not the voters agree that they would support it depending on these. So for example, Fremont Unified is among the lowest funded in Alameda County to ensure our children have access to the same quality of education as in neighboring districts. And you can start to see the impact of some of these statements as they go through the polling results. Moving to the bond, this is support for a hypothetical school bond measure. You'll see here 62.6%. This is looking at just over a $900 million bond in total. And so this does take us over that 50% threshold in the initial polling. And again, like we saw for the parcel tax, you'll see statements and how much more or somewhat likely they would be willing to vote in support of a measure if it were focused on specific areas. You'll see the top 4: replacing aging and leaking roofs, updated equipment for classrooms, science, computer labs, and libraries, update classroom science labs and classroom technology, and outdated, aging, deteriorating, temporary portable classrooms. Those are the areas that kind of come into the top, and you can see the rest of the areas on the screen before you as well. And on the informational statements, things that may impact the voters, again, it cannot, the bond measure can't be used for administrator salaries or central administration. All of the money goes to Fremont schools and cannot be taken back by the state. Also ensures that large property owners and large businesses pay their fair share. And you'll note with parcel tax, just as an informational piece for everybody, our current parcel tax is $73 per parcel. Doesn't really take into consideration how big your parcel is or how much it's worth. Whereas a bond measure is based on your assessed valuation. So it's a dollar amount based on the assessed valuation. Generally, $100,000 of assessed valuation is the amount that the number is generated from. So there was one appendix to these slides, which was just informational. They did some polling for a higher parcel tax, $248 instead of $73, and that did not poll as well as the reauthorization at $73. That polled in at about 55% support. So again, much lower than we would like to see in the polling in consideration for a future ballot measure. But again, that is also a stark difference between the $73 amount that exists for our community in the moment. So with that, it takes us to about 4:30. I want to stop on the presentation, but we did talk about this in our last session, and so I wanted to just bring a quick summary of the polling results to the group and see if there were questions or comments on some of the polling. I'd be happy to answer those the best I can. Ganesh, go ahead, please.
Actually, my question was not on the polling as much as the parcel tax itself. I just heard you say that it's $73 per parcel or $248 per parcel. So it's not dependent on the size of the parcel?
This one is $73 per parcel, the one that we have currently. The polling was for $248, but our current, sorry, I realize you're looking at that screen while I'm scrolling. I won't do that to you. Our current parcel tax is $73.
But it's independent of the size of the parcel? Like, can you clarify that? I mean, is this based on how much, or is a parcel always of the same size?
Yes, it's just the parcel itself. So let's take, for example, if you had 5 different homes throughout Fremont Unified, and all 5 of those homes vary greatly in size and square footage and value, they would all have the same $73 parcel tax.
But would they physically cover the same land area, like the parcel itself?
Yes, it's for each parcel of property.
Okay, so it's $73 per parcel, and doesn't matter the value of the home. But the size of the parcel is approximately the same.
That's correct.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. The size of the parcel is not. The size of the parcel is not relevant. It's just per parcel. So if you had 5 acres that you owned, or you had a quarter acre that you owned where your property was, it's still going to be the $73 per parcel. When we talk about a bond, that is based on the assessed valuation of the property. Mr. Hillman, is there any other information you'd want to add to that?
No, that's accurate. It doesn't matter what the size is for the parcel tax. It is $73, and parcels could be very large or very small, and it's the same dollar amount per. That's it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments on the polling data or our community outreach? Any of the two? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because this is an agenda item that doesn't have an associated presentation with us with the item today. But what we did talk about in our last session was if there was a significant increase in revenue for the district, and let's say that came from the state finally realizing that they continue to underfund schools throughout California, or let's just say maybe it came from the federal government finally answering the promise that they made to provide 40% of the special education costs in a district, or some other alternate outcome where school districts in the state start to receive more money. The request that we had in the last meeting was for this group to explore and think and brainstorm about if we could create and build things in Fremont Unified, programs or facilities. What would we want to create if we did see that increase in revenue? And the reason we want to have that conversation is to say, where do we want to go? Where do we want to dream? What would we like to do? And then we can start to get a framework of how we might accomplish that and what we might want to be thinking about. So opening that up, it's a pretty broad topic. I'm happy to take input Feedback, questions, comments, anything that the group would like to put towards that subject matter? Surya.
Yeah, I think like talent attraction and getting like good faculty is really important for like being able to support students. So I was wondering like how that could be contributed in like the future like budget. And also I noticed that in like the school funding presentation that was mentioned, and like how exactly are we making sure, I guess, that like the staff is like qualified almost?
Great question. So I'll make two comments about that, and one, well, maybe three. One, I agree with you. I think recruiting and retaining the best employees is one of the most important aspects for any district. Two, in terms of how we do that, generally it's looked at through a few lenses. If I go back to my HR hat or even my days as a principal or as a teacher, what employees are looking at is what kind of working conditions can a school district offer. And the working conditions can be the students that the school district is serving. It could be the environment in which they're teaching or working, the facility. Also, it could be the type of support that a school district provides for their employees. And the other piece that really factors into those decisions, as you would expect in any employment market, is what is the salary provided to employees. And so that's something that we go through with our collective bargaining units when we go through bargaining for our contracts and we talk about compensation. In terms of how do we make sure that our staff is qualified, there's a few things that happen. One, from a credentialing standpoint for our certificated staff, we are audited by our county office and the state to make sure that the individuals teaching the courses that they're teaching have the appropriate credential to be employed in those positions. And that's what we call the certificated side or the credentialed side of our employees. And on the classified side, while there aren't credentials, we do have a personnel commission, which ensures that our best candidates are the ones that are provided the opportunities for future employment when they're already working for the district. That helps with promotion from within the district. In terms of recruiting, we obviously do our best to try and recruit from outside the district for our classified positions as well. And again, like most markets for employment, whether private or public, employees are looking at what are the working conditions, what is the salary, and what are the things that they would consider in employment for an agency, or in our case, a school district, or in the private sector, a company. So those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at. But in terms of making sure they're qualified once employees work for us, depending on the union that they're in or the contract in which they're under, they're generally evaluated every year or every other year. There are some employees who, if they've been with the district on the certificated side for 10 years and they have positive evaluations, there's some education code that allows them to be evaluated every 5 years as opposed to every other year. Yogs, and then we'll go to Trustee Jones.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. And the question I had is more to do with the resources we have in schools. I know we have a shortage of teachers. I know that we've heard about some specific subject teachers not being there in some schools, but something which was more concerning for me was finding that some elementary schools don't have a librarian. The library has been closed throughout the school year. So I feel that not having a librarian should be one of the top things which at least elementary schools have in their goals. So how do we even allocate, or how do we even gauge what is the most essential jobs to be filled for the schools? Because elementary school without a library, according to me, is lacking something basic.
So thanks for that input and feedback. I do believe that all of our elementary schools have library and media assistants. If there's one that doesn't, it might be because of a vacancy, but we have provided an allocation for each elementary school to have a library media technologist. I'm sorry, it's not an assistant, it's library media technologist. But if there's a specific school you're speaking of, we can talk after the meeting, or you can send me a message. I'm happy to look at that a little bit more. Our librarians are at the high school level. We use library media technologists in the other levels. And so that is something that is important. In regards to your question about how do we establish what's most essential. From my experience, I think all of our positions are essential. I mean, when we think about teaching and learning, it boils down to the classroom itself, in my opinion, kind of being the primary place of teaching and learning. But we have to recognize that if those facilities aren't ready, if they're not clean, then that's not a great environment for learning. If we don't have the technology working, that impacts learning. If our kids aren't fed well, that impacts learning. So I think all the positions we have in the district are really critical to the success of students. It's hard to kind of prioritize one in value over the other, because I think they all are woven together to be critical components of the educational program for kids. And I do agree with you that libraries are important to that.
Thank you, Mr. Kamak. I had one more question. It's to do with the facilities. I know that we had an increase in the facility fees during pandemic because we had to like actually sanitize and whatnot. But are we planning to like get that fees back to what it was before, which was a minimum? I know that so many facilities are not even accessible. We had a hard time being in the council, but I can imagine the plight of the schools with no budget. If they want to reserve a facility, everyone is facing the same issue. The custodial cleaning fee today, I think that is like the highest. I know that it was bumped up for a reason during pandemic. Is there any way it is going to be going back to the normal now that we are out of pandemic?
So post-pandemic, I think our board has actually reduced the fees for facility rental by about 50%. But Mr. Hillman and I and our staff are also studying our facility rental process in total. So it is something that's coming under review for us to look carefully at our overall facility use process and some of the fees associated with that. So we're going to continue with that work.
Thank you.
Trustee Jones.
Well, as you might imagine, I have a very long list, but I'm going to stick to three things. If we could do anything, if we had the money to do it, I want to provide health care to our employees, health benefits, bring back busing, and I would like to add a position at the district office. I know that's not popular for some, but I would love for us to have a sustainability coordinator or director at the district level, somebody who's working on sustainability and green efforts throughout the district.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I've made note of those three areas. Stephen.
Hey, thank you. I'd like to say two things about high schools, one large and one small. The large one is I'd be interested in exploring partnerships with the city. Thinking about Dublin High has a community pool right next to Dublin High, and it makes for a nice athletic facility they have there. The smaller amount is just keeping in mind the basic aesthetics of new lights and paint in the plan. I remember once our lights were changed at the gym I was a principal at. I can't tell you the aesthetic difference it made. A coat of paint in Irvington's halls would probably go a long way. So just a little thing to be included in our planning as well.
Thank you very much, Director Musto. We'll go to Ganesh and then Liz.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was going to, for ideas, I was going to talk about sports. I think if I'm not mistaken, in the meeting next week, there's a discussion around the big stadium for Fremont Unified. Is that a board vote on that, or is that a general update?
So there is an agenda item for Tax Stadium. As you may recall, Tax Stadium is the stadium where all five of our comprehensive high schools compete in a number of sports: track and field, soccer, football, and where all graduations are held. We did replace the turf last summer, as that was about 15 years old, and it's recommended for a 10-year lifespan. And what is on the board agenda for Wednesday night, we estimate that to fully renovate Tax Stadium, it's going to cost about $8.5 million. But we, as many people do, look at the comprehensive needs of Fremont Unified facilities and recognize that that's a relatively high price tag in order to accomplish all that, with many competing needs and interests. So what is on the agenda for Wednesday night is the resurfacing of the track, which goes around the field turf that we've already replaced. And that's this place where most of our high schools are practicing and competing for track and field events. We estimate that that cost is going to be about $585,000 to resurface the track. So the agenda item for Wednesday night is not a full renovation at $8.5 million. It's to resurface the track this summer so that it's ready for the next year.
Perfect. So if we're looking for big ideas, I would look at, I would want to propose improvement of tracks and facilities at each of the schools. Like if we did have the budget, because I think a lot of the tracks are mud tracks right now that aren't very usable when the rains come. So that would be one thing. And another sort of crazy idea from a sports side that I would want us to look at is having facilities for the sport of cricket. As you might know, students from Fremont Unified have actually represented the U.S. Men's team, the women's team, the men's under 19, the women's under 19 in cricket. So there is a lot of effort and work that the students are putting together to achieve that. And if we had more facilities supporting that around FUSD, it would definitely be a lot of help for the students. And I've seen, I think to some extent, happening in Tri-Valley areas. But given how many of our students have actually represented us nationally, it would be awesome to have more support for that if we had the funds.
Thank you. We have heard that request before as well. So thank you for that. Liz.
Well, if money is no object, I think what is needed most in the district is more student support. So across the board, lower class sizes, and also some of our specialists, the support that they give, like school counselors, nurses, our speech language pathologists.
More staffing in that regard, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Lower ratios. There's so many students that they are trying to reach, and it is very difficult, especially in some of the larger high school and secondary settings.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Susan and then Michelle.
Liz, you read my mind. I have my little list here. So my top 3 items are lowering class size, and we have seen in the past where we have had lower class size, our children have grown a lot academically. I also would, the second item is to continue our intervention specialists. I have seen firsthand in the past few years, the collaboration and the works of our intervention specialists in helping to close the achievement gap. And the last item is counselors. I love having counselors at the elementary level because so many of our children have someone other than their teacher to talk to and to provide support to. And so those are my top 3 items. And Tammy Solis, the survey for the staff updates was out on October 12th because I looked it up. If you're there, Tammy, I don't see you.
I've sent her the direct link as well.
Okay.
It is October 12th. Thank you.
October 12th. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and then we'll go to Yogs and Rocio.
Thank you. My top 3 are roofs, and roofs. We have a lot of problems at all of our schools, mainly because they were built before we really started getting hot weather in Fremont. We used to have windows that had louver windows and we could open up and get air. And then Columbine hit and everything got sealed up. The problem is that you keep adding things, you keep putting people on the roof. Every time someone walks on a roof, it'll crack. And when you're trying to trace your leaks or whatever, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack because they go. So what we have to look at is really investing money into new roofing. The patching, as much as we've tried to patch it together, it's just not holding up anymore. And we really have to look at that infrastructure and fixing, replacing parts, not just fixing it anymore, because you can't fix it anymore. So that's our 3. Thank you.
Thank you. I wrote down roofs 3 times, I promise. Yogs and then Rocio.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Kamak. I'm back with two more. So the first one is just like we have a stadium which represents like the sports for all the high schools. I would like to have an art building for all the high schools. Given how important art education is, we don't have any venue which can be used for any form of arts meetup. I would like to have an art meetup for all the high schoolers where they can. I mean, even if you want to do something like that, we don't have any venue which can be used for that. Given how important arts has been recognized as part of the education, not having one in the high school level, I don't know, it will be good to have something in the high school level. So that was the first one. The second one is to do with the high school courses. It would be good to have one elective which focuses on sustainability. That would also help all the premises. Like we can have a project where kids will try to like cool the classrooms. That can be one project. Something as simple as growing some particular vine or creeper along the side of the walls can be one project. If we can allocate one such elective which focuses on helping the school building as well, that will be futuristic. It can also help the future as well. They would know how to use what we have today to probably cool the buildings or make it more sustainable. Those were the two things which I had.
Okay, thank you very much. Rocio.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Kamat. And I will say, probably to help the communities that have more need in Fremont, like continue growing the community school program, which I know Cabrillo is in the phase of started, right? But in other districts, they already been using this program, means that in the second or third phase of several years, and that were able to help a lot of the communities, not only Title ones, and that brings a lot of resources where they are. There are people here mentioned today, counselors, intervention, all those kind of programs that we already have the money and with the government, but we have to claim it and go by phases. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Trustee Zhang.
Okay. Well, I would like to look at, especially for the summer, how we're going to fully utilize our facility. Because right now we have a 3 beautifully renovated middle school, and we need to fully utilize the summer so that we can get more rent and also support some programs from third vendors. And as to the renovation, let's see, I heard some parent talk about the tracks. I think in that same line of thoughts, we need to look at from the frequency of the usage and also frequency of usage to decide what are the priorities. I agree that those tracks are, for students, and they could, if it's not being maintained, they could cause some of the health hazard. And another thing is about special ed, well, which is maybe not be related to this one, but I see that our special ed what's called cost has increased like 35%, and can we work with some other, basically what are the ways we can reduce the fees, and why there is a limited vendors for this, and that's also kind of further decrease the money, and we can use for something else, not directly aligned. Yes.
So your areas of feedback would be ensuring we're using our facilities to the max in terms of rentals, and then looking at the tracks. I think there's agreement across many different audiences that our athletic facilities, both the elementary and secondary, have a significant need for improvement at our school sites. And then in terms of special ed, decreasing costs is a remarkably challenging venture. Not to say that it's not a worthwhile endeavor, but I know we share agreement that it's important for us to provide the programs and services our special education students need. There is a challenge that we also see with non-public school rate increases or non-public agency vendors because there is not a large market, so there's not a lot of competitive pricing that's happening. So that is definitely a challenge that school districts are facing as well, and something that we can continue to explore. But I know that's not a problem unique to Fremont Unified, and thanks to the great work of our staff, I think we meet our students pretty well with early levels of intervention, which keeps our overall special ed population lower than the state average, which is a good thing as well. So we'll continue to explore that. With that, that takes us to about 7 minutes to go, and I believe there was a question about future scheduling of the dates. Is that correct, Patty?
Yes, so student board members reached out to us with regards to our current standing dates for this meeting, and it conflicts with a student board E, I believe, date.
Okay.
Shreya, was that you that reached out to me? Kid, you want to tell us more about what the request is?
Yeah, so we have our surfboard meetings like on the Mondays before every board meeting at like 4:30. So when me and Anvi come to this meeting, we get there kind of late. So if it was like convenient, we were just wondering if like another time would work, but we completely understand if it wouldn't as well.
Okay, so the request would be for a different standing meeting time because this one is in conflict with the surfboard meetings.
Yeah, we had sent you an email about this, I think last week, but I'm not sure if it went through.
I
Yes.
did not receive an email on that to me
I received
directly,
it.
but okay.
So it's only those Mondays that are right before the meeting. You see the
Our
meeting.
Mondays it's at the same time as the meeting, and I think our meetings are every 2 weeks on Monday, and then
Every
this
2 weeks.
once a month.
Okay, I think I can work with both of you to figure that schedule out.
Okay, thank you so much.
As we close today's meeting, I want to thank everybody for their input. I wrote down all of the things that were said, including on my notes, writing roof 3 times. What I think is good is when I look at the broad range of feedback, most of it centers around making sure that our students and our staff have the things that they need to serve our students in the best way possible. I think another exciting kind of trend that at least I personally saw is some of the things we want are things that we have in the moment, such as intervention teachers and counselors at the elementary level. The challenge that exists before us is trying to make sure we can find a way to sustain those things over time, because as we know, much of those are being paid for with one-time dollars. And so this has been good feedback for me that I can continue to work with our business office on, our facilities team on, our instructional team, and I can share this feedback with the Board of Education as a whole. As we turn our attention to our November meeting, are there any specific topics that this group would like to be exploring in that November meeting? We don't yet have the first interim done at that time, do we, Mr. Akala?
I don't think we'll have it completely done.
Okay.
We might be able to give some preliminary updates, but it's going to be tight.
Okay, that's what I figured. That's generally something we look at in the meeting after November. And we don't really have any new information generally from the state at that time either. So it gives us a little bit of a blank canvas in terms of areas that we'd like to discuss. Michelle, I see your hand up.
Yes, one of the questions I had, and it may not be at this meeting, but it is budgetary, is we've talked for many years about solar power. I know we've had different companies come through, make different presentations and stuff. And I was just wondering, is the district still entertaining that, or if they put it on the back burner because of cost? Because they say, oh, we'll install for free, but they really don't mean that because they're making their money. So I was just wondering where we're at on that.
Yeah, we'd be happy to provide an update in November. We are still working on that very diligently. We've approved some partnerships in that work, and so that should come right in sequence with when we'd be able to give an update on our solar projects. We've already done some testing of the school sites. I think some ground sampling in terms of where the solar arrays may go. So there is work already progressing on that. So we'll bring forward an update in November. Rocio.
And echoing Mr. Kama, what Jokes was saying, and because I've heard from a few units, when do you think you will give us an answer about the procedure for the facility rental? Do you think November will be early, or do you think you guys going to discuss it? I know it's been up in the last board meeting. You guys say that we will discuss it about it because Mr. Vivek mentioned something about a customer that we lost and he went to Milpitas or something, but it's a coincidence that we're having a hard time to rent the facilities as well. So
yeah, the facility rental process is a pretty comprehensive topic that's going to require a lot of studying, and it's also rooted in our board policies, and it has a long history. So in terms of managing expectations, I wouldn't expect that to be something that's ready for discussion in November. But I'll definitely keep it on our list that that's something that this group is interested in.
perfect. Thank you.
Yokes?
Hi, I just wanted to add on to that one. I know that you are already in the discussion mode. It'll be nice to have some additional percentage off for events which are happening in the school level. Like, for example, when the council is doing something, we should have a different rate compared to what the outside nonprofits or outside organizations are offered in terms of renting the facility. Even though we are just nonprofit, given that we are running it for the school, should have a different rate is what I just wanted to bring in. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there are other topics that are of interest to you and you haven't shared them in this meeting today, please feel free to email myself or Patty, and we will work with staff to prepare those best we can. I thank everybody for their willingness to be part of the discussion today, for spending a few minutes and thinking big about what could be, and for receiving the other information and updates that we provided. Thank you all very much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take good care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.